Ashtaprayeshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavat Utama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Reading this morning from chapter 5, wonderful chapter from the first canto. We'll be reading the first 11 verses. And I'd like to ask if we could read all the translations, just going ladies' side, men's side, back and forth, as soon as we have them available. Yes. So, okay. Ladies first. Do we have a mic? Ooh. All right, mic. Christina's not here. Okay, so we're getting them out. Sutta Goswami said, thus the sage amongst the gods, Narada, comfortably seated and apparently smiling, addressed the rishi amongst the Brahmins, Vyas.
Addressing Vyasadeva, the son of Parashara, Narada inquired, are you satisfied by identifying with the body or the mind as objects of self-realization?
Pretty sarcastic start, isn't it?
You're inquiring.
It's good.
Your inquiries were full and your studies were also well fulfilled. And there is no doubt that you have prepared a great and wonderful work in the Mahabharata, which is full of all kinds of Vedic sequences elaborately explained.
Yeah, please.
You have fully delineated the subject of impersonal Brahman as well as the knowledge derived therefrom. Why should you be despondent in spite of all of this, thinking that you are undone, my dear Prabhu?
Sri Vasudeva said, all you have said about me is perfectly correct. Despite all this, I am not pacified. I therefore question you about the root cause of my dissatisfaction, for you are a man of unlimited knowledge due to your being of the offspring of one Brahmana, who is self-born, without mundane father and mother.
My lord, everything that is mysterious is known to you because you worship the creator and destroyer of the material world and the maintainer of the spiritual world, the original personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to the three modes of material nature.
Like the sun, your goodness can travel everywhere in the three worlds, and like the air, you can penetrate the internal region of everyone. As such, you are as good as the all-pervasive supersoul. Please, therefore, find out the deficiency in me, despite my being absorbed in transcendence under disciplinary regulations and vows.
Sri Narada said, you have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the personality of Godhead. That philosophy which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord is considered worthless.
Although, great sage, you have very broadly described the four principles beginning with religious performances, you have not described the glories of the Supreme Personality, Vasudeva.
Those words which do not describe the glories of the Lord, who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe, are considered by saintly persons to be like unto a place of pilgrimage for crows, since the all-perfect persons are inhabitants of the transcendental abode, they do not derive any pleasure there.
Yeah, and that brings us to today's verse that we're going to read despite Gopi Jivan Prabhu quoting this verse on Friday. Oh. Tadvag visargo janatag haviplavo Yasmin pratishlokam abadhavatyapi Manyanantasya yashon kitaniya Shrimvanti gayanti grinanti sarava Bhag visargo janatag haviplavo Yasmin prati shlokam abadhavadyapi.
Yasmin prati shlokam abadhavadyapi.
Namanyanantasya yasham kitaniya.
Namanyanantasya yasham kitaniya.
Vanti gayanti grinanti sadhava.
Vanti gayanti grinanti sadhava.
Please chant.
Yasmin prati shlokam abadhavadyapi.
Namanyanantasya yasham kitaniya.
Namanyanantasya yasham kitaniya. Shrivanti gayanti grinanti sadhava. Visargo janataga viplavo. Yasmin prati shlokam abadhavadyapi. Yasmin prati shlokam abadhavadyapi. Namanyanantasya yasham kitaniya. Namanyanantasya yasham kitaniya. Shrivanti gayanti grinanti sadhava. Shrivanti gayanti grinanti sadhava. Visargo janataga viplavo.
Yasmin prati shlokam abadhavadyapi.
Yasmin prati shlokam abadhavadyapi.
Namanyanantasya yasyo niklaniya.
Namanyanantasya yasham kitaniya.
Shrivanti gayanti grinanti sadhava.
Shrivanti gayanti grinanti sadhava.
Let's read synonyms together, please. Tat, that, vak, vocabulary, visarga, ish, janata, the people in general, agha, sin, vibhava, revolutionary, dasan, which, prati shloka, each and every stanza, abadhavadyapi, regularly composed, api, in spite of, mani, kinds and things, etc., anantasya, of the unlimited Lord. Yasha, glories, Adnakitani, depicted. Yat, what? Shunati, do hear. Gayanti, do sing. Grinanti, do accept. Sadhavaha, the purified men who are honest. Translation together. On the other hand, that literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, pastimes, etc., of the unlimited supreme Lord is a different creation. Full of transcendental words is directed towards bringing about a revolution and implies the lives of this world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendent literatures, even though perfectly composed, are very strong and accepted by purified men who are really honest. This is a classic report by Srila Prabhupada, very important report. So we'd like to start reading this rather lengthy report. Next, please go.
It is a qualification of the great thinkers to pick up the best even from the worst. It is said that the intelligent man should pick up nectar from a stalk of poison, should accept gold even from a filthy place, should accept a good and qualified wife even from an obscure family, and should accept a good lesson even from a man or from a teacher who comes from the untouchables. These are some of the ethical instructions for everyone in every place without exception. But a saint is far above the level of an ordinary man. He is always absorbed in glorifying the Supreme Lord, because by broadcasting the holy name and fame of the Supreme Lord, the polluted atmosphere of the world will change. And as a result of propagating the transcendental literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam, people will become sane in their transactions. While preparing this commentation on this particular stanza of Srimad Bhagavatam, we have a crisis before us. Our neighboring friend China has attacked the border of India with a militaristic spirit. We have practically no business in the political field, yet we see that previously there were both China and India, and they both lived peacefully for centuries without ill feeling. The reason is that they lived those days in an atmosphere of God consciousness, and every country over the surface of the world was God-fearing, pure-hearted, and simple, and there was no question of political diplomacy. There is no cause of quarrel between the two countries, China and India, over land which is not very suitable for habitation, and certainly there is no cause for fighting on this issue. But due to the age of quarrel, Kali, which we have discussed, there is always a chance of quarrel on slight provocation. This is due not to the issue in question, but to the polluted atmosphere of this age. Systematically, there is propaganda by a section of people to stop glorification of the name and fame of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, there is a great need for disseminating the message of Srimad Bhagavatam all over the world. It is the duty of every responsible Indian to broadcast the transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the world, to do all the supermost good, as well as to bring about the desired peace in the world. Because India has failed in her duty by neglecting this responsible work, there is so much quarrel and trouble all over the world. We are confident that if the transcendental message of Srimad Bhagavatam is received only by the leading men of the world, certainly there will be a change of heart, and naturally the people in general will follow them. The mass of people in general are tools in the hands of the modern politicians and leaders of the people. If there is a change of heart of the leaders only, certainly there will be a radical change in the atmosphere of the world. We know that our honest attempt to present this great literature conveying transcendental messages for reviving the God consciousness of the people in general and re-spiritualizing the world atmosphere is fraught with many difficulties. Our presenting this matter in adequate language, especially a foreign language, will certainly fail, and there will be so many literary discrepancies despite our honest attempt to present it in the proper way. But we are sure that with all our faults in this connection, the seriousness of the subject matter will be taken into consideration, and the leaders of society will still accept this due to its being an honest attempt to glorify the Almighty God. When there is fire in a house, the inmates of the house go out to get help from the neighbors who may be foreigners, and yet without knowing the language, the victims of the fire express themselves, and the neighbors understand the need, even though not expressed in the same language. The same spirit of cooperation is needed to broadcast this transcendental message of the Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the polluted atmosphere of the world. After all, it is a technical science of spiritual values, and thus we are concerned with the techniques and not with the language. If the techniques of this great literature are understood by the people of the world, there will be success.
Right. Wonderful. Huh? Now, there's one more paragraph, so the ladies' side, so would you like to read? Actually, okay. Before we start, I just want to mention, does anyone know this part of the world Prabhupada is referring to, China and India fighting? It's part of the Himalayas. It's a very mountainous region, not good for agriculture. Hardly anyone lives there, but they're fighting over it then, and they're still fighting over it today.
Is it where the Dalai Lama is at?
No, that was say Tibet. Yeah, that was absorbed by China in the 50s. He's in exile in India, but they're fighting over some mountainous region. Crazy. Okay, so Gayatri, please.
When there are too many materialistic activities by the people in general all over the world, there is no wonder that a person or a nation attacks another person or nation on slight provocation. That is the rule of this age of Kali or quarrel. The atmosphere is already polluted with corruption of all description, and everyone knows it well. There are so many unwanted literatures full of materialistic ideas of sense gratification. In many countries, there are bodies appointed by the state to detect and censor obscene literature. This means that neither the government nor the responsible leaders of the public want such literature, yet it is in the marketplace because the people want it for sense gratification. The people in general want to read, that is a natural instinct, but because their minds are polluted, they want such literatures. Under the circumstances, transcendental literature like Srimad Bhagavatam will not only diminish the activities of the corrupt mind of the people in general, but also it will supply food for their hankering after reading some interesting literature. In the beginning, they may not like it because one suffering from jaundice is reluctant to take sugar candy, but we should know that sugar candy is the only remedy for jaundice. Similarly, let there be systematic propaganda for popularizing the reading of the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam, which will act like sugar candy for the jaundice-like condition of sense gratification.
When men have a taste for this literature, the other literatures, which are catering poison to society, will then automatically cease.
Please go ahead and finish.
We are sure, therefore, that everyone in human society will welcome Srimad Bhagavatam, even though it is now presented with so many faults, for it is recommended by Sri Narada, who has very kindly appeared in this chapter.
I love to meditate on Srila Prabhupada writing these purports in Vrindavan, 1963, 62. No followers, no money, living in a little room, holding a typewriter, doing everything himself. And yet so much, we are sure, therefore, that everyone in human society will welcome Srimad Bhagavatam. So much faith. That's what God consciousness means. It's because he's seeing Krishna all around him all the time. There's no doubt in his mind about the reality of spiritual life. And he just expresses that automatically. So the verse prior to this is the antithesis, that literatures that do not glorify Krishna are like a place of pilgrimage for crows. I would also use the analogy of bees and flies. Whereas flies are attracted to honey, bees are attracted to honey, flies are attracted to other things. And literatures which do not describe Krishna are therefore attractive to people whose consciousness is low. The context of this is, of course, Vyasadeva has just finished compiling the Vedas, the Puranas, Mahabharata, and Narada is coming and saying, these are like literatures, places of pilgrimage for crows. These highly elevated literature. What to speak of, what Prabhupada mentions in the purport, kind of literatures, obscene literatures, and what to speak of now the internet age. The number one use of the internet is for pornography. So yeah, this is the condition in which we're trying to present devotional purity. So there are 6 philosophies in India, great philosophies, aside from Buddhism, which originated in India but is not considered Vedic. And these begin with Karma Mimamsa, which is Jaimini. Karma Mimamsa means like everything in the universe is happening automatically by the laws of karma. It's just automatic, there's no deity, there's no control, just the laws are there and it's going on. So if you're pious, then you get good results. And if you're sinful, you get bad results. So be pious, everybody. This is the Karma Mimamsa philosophy. And then it's a little more sophisticated with Nyaya or logic, which is taught by Gautama, not Buddha, but another Gautama. And the logic means that, yes, there's karma, but we can understand more, that there's more depth than just this automatic action and reaction. So then even more detailed is next, what's the name, Kanada. It teaches the Vaisheshika philosophy, which is that matter can ultimately be just broken down to atoms. And we see these philosophies today. It's not like the ancient Indian philosophy. This is pretty much the standard in society now, that if you break down things to their nano components, then you really discover reality and you can manipulate matter and so forth. So this is the Vaisheshika philosophy of atomic theory, which of course is true. I mean, the atoms comprise matter, and the space between the components of the atom. What are those components? The neutrons, electrons. The space between them is so vast that if all the matter in the universe were compressed with no space, it would be the size of a grapefruit. So it seems so solid, but it's mostly just space, empty space in it. Anyway, the Vaisheshika approach is let's analyze matter to this nth degree. Then it becomes even more analytical with Sankhya philosophy, which is the organization of matter into earth, water, air, fire, ether, and mind, intelligence, false ego, and all the 24 different components or various numerical divisions that are used. So that's Sankhya. All of these are essentially atheistic philosophies. They don't have a component of a deity involved. There's matter and it's happening and we can analyze it. And that's where you find truth. This is really like kind of Aristotle's approach to truth. If we analyze matter sufficiently, we'll eventually come to the reality. So the sixth philosophy is Vyasadev's Vedanta. And this Vedanta presents a tato brahma jigyasa, that now that you've come to the human form of life, it's time to understand that there is God. Janmadya yatam vayata. All this matter comes from God. So the philosophy introduced in all these literatures that Narada is condemning is this Vedanta philosophy. First he wrote the Vedas, the four Vedas. First there was one Veda, which is like all knowledge. And the four Vedas were then divided so that in Kali Yuga people could handle them more easily, because after all, if things are broken into pieces, they're easier to digest. So these four Vedas include like Rig Veda. Rig means like the hymns, the ritual, no, the hymns, that's it, yes. And then the Samaveda is how to sing the hymns. It's full of melodies and music. And there is the Yajurveda, which is like sacrifice, how to perform yagyas with the mantras. And then there's the Artava Veda, which is considered the kind of the most inferior of them. It deals with like, arts, like economic development and protecting yourself and dealing with the material energy. So all of these Vedas were divided and left in care of great sages by Vyasadeva, and yet Vyasadeva realized people in Kali Yuga will not even be able to understand that. Better I just summarize the essence of it. So he wrote the Vedanta Sutra, which is a summary study of the four Vedas, so that just understand this one shorter book, you can get the essence of the whole Veda. But even that, you saw people could not appreciate. It's too philosophical. That verse I mentioned, Janmadyasya Yatonvaya, that's the first verse of the Vedanta Sutra. Now that you've come to the human life, try to understand the absolute truth. It's unusual for a book to begin with therefore, but that's the first word, therefore, so that the assumption is now you're able to read. It's also important to note that these things were written down, all these books were written because people were so dumb, they couldn't remember them, right? If it is considered a sign of progress to write things down, then why is it when you get older, you have to use notes all the time? Why did I come in the room? Where are my glasses? Yes, if you know something, you don't have to refer to the manual. You know it, right? But if you don't know it, then you need the manual. So written word is not a sign of progress, it's a sign of regression. Previously, people could remember everything. There was no need to write it down. So Vyasadev's writing all of this was just a concession for people in Kali Yuga who didn't have the intellectual capacity to remember it. So after writing all that, still he could see the inadequacy and the irrelevance of this philosophy to people in this age. So therefore he wrote Mahabharata. These are called the Itihasas, the supplementary literature to the Vedas. The Puranas, the Upanishads, well, Upanishads are kind of a mix, but the Puranas are considered supplements to make the Vedic knowledge more relevant to people. There's Puranas in the mode of ignorance and passion and goodness. So he then wrote the Mahabharata, which is a real page turner. In India, some years ago, they serialized Mahabharata on TV. And it was really amazing because the whole country would just shut down, wasn't it? Anyone remember? Remember? There's this, the whole country would shut down when the Mahabharata was played. They didn't have this is pre-internet days.
So whoever had TV, everyone would go to their house.
Yes, and whoever had and you see in these little, I remember going on a train, going through these little villages with mud huts and see an antenna on top. It was so the Mahabharata is for that purpose. It attracts the minds of people, and it's a fascinating story. It's just endlessly, just when is Hollywood ever going to figure it out? But anyway, Peter Brooks, this famous thespian, did a 9-hour Broadway production of the Mahabharata. A number of devotees went to see it, and 9 hours looked like 4 intermissions because there's just so much to cover. And he did it with very international casts, various races represented, and very simple, dress and the props and so forth. Anyway, Mahabharata has that incredibly attractive quality. Who here has read the Mahabharata? Oh, just a handful. Okay. Oh, you watched the series? No, they didn't. If you ever get sick and you just want to escape in something human, something decent, then just get one of these. There's many editions of the Mahabharata, and many of them are by impersonalists and people of questionable philosophical position, but it doesn't matter because the Mahabharata itself is considered a very corrupt literature in terms of the Sanskrit quality. Many interpretations and folk tales have been added to it here and there all over India, so you have so many different versions. You can't really count on it as scripture, but it's a page turner. It's so interesting to read the character development and all the episodes. It's amazing. Of course, this was still inadequate because it did not take people right to the point of Krishna consciousness. So all of these Vedas all of these literatures that Vyasa wrote were for the purpose of gradually purifying people, just to gradually purify the very fallen people of Kali Yuga. So they advocate what's called the 4 Purusharthas, or the 4 ordinary goals of human life. This is Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Dharma means, closest word in English is religion, piety, dutifulness, responsibility. That's Dharma. And Artha is economic development. Kama is sense enjoyment. And Moksha is liberation. So we see these are natural cycles in human society. It's like, for example, in our society, if you're responsible, if you got your degree, and if you've got your life together, you have what? You got a job. You got a job, and you're responsible, and you're good at it, and you show up, and you're there doing your Dharma Monday through Friday. And then on Friday, what happens? Paydays. Yeah, it's payday. It's payday. So you do your Dharma all week, and then it's time for Artha, economic development. And then on Saturday, what happens? Party. Yeah, it's sense gratification. That's the mode of goodness. I'm sorry. Anyway, yeah, one way or another, enjoy. Spend some money, enjoy. And then Sunday morning, wake up. Oh, God. What have I done? I'm going to church. I'm repentant. And then it's Monday, so the cycle starts all over again. It's Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. So after sense enjoyment, there's a natural sense of this did not bring me happiness. I need something more. But then we're stuck in the Dharma. We have to go back. So the Vedas still nonetheless teach these because it's better than adharma. It's better to be a responsible person, even if you're not fully on the spiritual path, because that will gradually bring you to the point of surrender to God. But the problem with that Purushartha system is that people get so entangled in it, they feel that if I'm just a good person, that's good enough. And that we see in our society, isn't it? Like in Judaism or Christianity, basically, if you stay with your spouse and you remain married to your spouse, you are a Paramahamsa Mahatma. You know? Hey, so yeah, the whole idea of success is just to not get too drunk. Don't get too drunk and stay with your spouse. And then this is like a great accomplishment, right? But the problem with that, of course, is that nowhere is there time for a Tato Brahma Jigyasa, for inquiring about the absolute truth. So this is why Vyasa was depressed. I love this reality of Vyasadeva. You know, he's writing Srimad Bhagavatam here, and he's talking about why it was written. It's a very natural prelude to the book, isn't it? I was depressed. He's writing about himself in the third person here. Vyasa did this, Vyasa did that. He's writing about himself in the third person because he is an integral personality in the Bhagavatam. But he doesn't want to use the first person. Well, I did this and I felt that. It's like in the Prabhupada's biography, Satsvarup Maharaj, the author, writes about himself in the third person. And Steve came and Steve did this. Steve brought a mango to Prabhupada. And also, I don't know if anyone has read this wonderful new memoir by Govinda Dasi called The Place of Sandalwood and Roses. If you have a chance, it's a fantastic book. And she had a lot of association with Prabhupada and was debating, and she was struggling to write her memoirs for years. And then it finally struck her to write in the third person, and then it just came right out. So she writes about Govinda Dasi said this, Govinda Dasi felt that. So Vyasa is doing the same thing here. He's writing about himself, and he's expressing his depression. Isn't that amazing? You know, he's the literary incarnation of God, and yet he's depressed. Can we relate to that? So what is depression? Depression is sometimes defined as repressed anger. We're unhappy about something, but we can't do anything about it, so we get depressed. So Vyasa's depression was part of his expression of it's part of his service to Krishna. So this is important to understand, because when we get depressed, we sometimes think that it's some fault of our own, it's some shortcoming, but this is sometimes how Krishna guides us, by creating feelings that are pushing us in other directions than the one we're going. Kind of like, you know, when you're driving on a rural road, they have those little bumps. So if you happen to go out of your lane, it goes, da, 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 da. So that's a little like, okay, got to get back on lane. So depression, anxiety, setbacks, annoying people, all these are little like reminders. Okay, just keep focused here. So Vyasa's, and rather his guru's prescription, Narada just appears magically, just when he needs him. I'm depressed, I don't know what to do, I've done all this writing, I'm still not satisfied. Boom, there's Narada Muni, just perfectly descending to address this perplexity. This is why this section of Bhagavatam, again, is so magic, because Narada just appears and he gives him the instructions. The problem is we haven't directly glorified Krishna. So he goes on, as this chapter progresses, to tell him exactly how to do that. Therefore, Vyasa wrote Srimad Bhagavatam. So he had this order from his guru. This is, as Prabhupada writes, this is where Narada appears in Srimad Bhagavatam for the first time. And yet, we find throughout the Bhagavatam, Narada keeps appearing over and over and over again. Right? When Prahlad Maharaj was in the womb, who was instructing his mother? Narada Muni. When Yudhisthira had questions about society, who was instructing him? When Dhruva went to the forest to meditate, who did he meet? So sometimes the Bhagavatam is called a glorification of his guru by Vyasadeva. He's just showing how Narada appears over and over all these different times and circumstances. When Kamsa was being nice to Devaki and Vasudeva, who appeared? That's right. Don't you know all the demigods are taking birth all around you? So the cure for the problem he had is to directly get to the point of glorifying Krishna. And this is the other great lesson for us in our lives. If we are feeling some deficiency, the solution is to turn our minds to glorifying Krishna. This is what Prabhupada is saying in this purport. That all of the battles, all of the fighting, all of the quarreling in Kali Yuga can be mitigated only by a sense of God consciousness that comes from Srimad Bhagavatam. That's why this literature is so revolutionary. It has the power to awaken God consciousness, and most people are just not interested. Most people are just not interested. Manusyanam sahasra shripaschid yatadisi. Very, very few people are interested even in moksha. And even those who are interested in moksha and being freed of the material world, very few of them come to the point of understanding what is taught in Srimad Bhagavatam. So Kali Yuga is this age of extremes. People are either extremely unfortunate or extremely fortunate. There's not much middle ground. We have this very great fortune to understand what is in Srimad Bhagavatam. And it's just important to, I'll just close by saying what a privilege it is. It's such a privilege to have access to this knowledge. Even very intelligent people, well-meaning, good-hearted people, they can't get it. They can't get it. And we're not asking anything of people. We're asking, don't change your life. Don't put on a bed sheet. You don't have to shave your head. Just try to understand what is here in Srimad Bhagavatam. No, thank you. I'm not interested. I've got my own philosophy. Right? So that can be very discouraging, but we should always remember that it is our service to Krishna to practice and as far as possible share Krishna consciousness with others. That's what we can control, that's what we can do, and that's good enough. If we simply do that, the results are up to Krishna. We are shooting our arrows, and then the result is up to Krishna. That way we can deal with our own depression or sense of shortcoming as they arise. All right, thank you. Any comments, any reflections on these points? Yes. Use the microphone.
What's the difference between dharma or religion and moksha or liberation?
Dharma is like doing your duty, being responsible. And moksha is like, I want to get out of doing my duty. I want to be through, I want to be finished with all this entanglement. I'm frustrated, I'm not getting anywhere, and I just want to be free. So that is the impersonalist concept. Just let me end the suffering. It's Buddhism also. Just let me end my involvement with this world and be free. I don't care what else happens.
So does that mean that someone who's contemplating suicide, that could be a form of moksha?
Yeah, it's a very ignorant concept of moksha. Let me just put an end to it all, not knowing that there's going to be ramifications from that sinful act. Life's a dud, quote the great poet Kendra Das. Life's a dud, I can't suicide, I'd come back a spud and I'd be fried. Got to learn the slokas. Good.
Yeah, so something that stuck out to me in the purport was when Prabhupada was speaking to how the masses of people are maybe like, I don't know, like how like the leaders of a nation really influence and maybe, I don't know the exact words, maybe like control.
Tools.
Yeah, and so something that comes to mind for me is like, I think that Krishna House, it's giving such a great service to the inhabitants of Gainesville and maybe particularly those on the university campus, right? Like students, staff, faculty. And I'm curious if there are devotees who are maybe targeting politicians and things like that. Yeah, it's just a curiosity for me that I've had.
Are there devotees who are targeting like the leaders of society to try to reach them with Krishna consciousness? Just because you see Prabhupada is saying that if just the leaders will take it up, then the mass of people will follow. There are, one of the differences between like Krishna consciousness in the West and Krishna consciousness in India is that the devotees in India now have developed great access to political leaders. In fact, they just named park, there's a big lake across the street from the Calcutta temple, and the municipality is renaming that Bhaktivedanta Lake and giving them opportunities to develop it. So it's more challenging in the West to reach politicians because it's not good for their political careers to be affiliated with Hare Krishnas. Tulsi Gabbard, if you know who Tulsi Gabbard is. Yeah, so she was born in a family of devotees in Hawaii and practices bhakti. And when she was a congresswoman, the devotees in Washington would meet with her regularly, bring her prasadam. She asked them to cater events and things. And there are other examples. Obama said to have a Hanuman, and he carried with him for good luck a deity of Hanuman. And the problem again is that politicians are generally concerned about staying in power because they feel, okay, let me just stay in power and then I'll be able to do some good, even if they are, either they stay in power and they get lots of money, or they stay in power and they try to do some good. Mostly they have ulterior motives, but some of them actually really want to do good. Actually, when Radhanath Maharaj met Obama some years ago at some event, and those events typically they're just a little short handshake, and photo op. But Maharaj said something to Obama, and he sat there and he talked for what seemed like a long time, 2 or 3 minutes or more, but longer than anyone else. And what Maharaj said was that, I know you're really trying to help people in your position. And that resonated with Obama so much that he wanted to talk to this person for a while. So it's difficult to reach for this reason. Are there devotees targeting? In America is very decentralized. ISKCON is very decentralized. In England, it's very centralized and more. So they act more in concert and they have more influence with the government. So they have, the Queen has come, the Queen before she passed, she came to one of the devotee schools. The children recited the 3rd verse of the Shikshastakam to her. One can chant the holy name in a humble state of mind. In such a state of mind, one can chant constantly. And she said, wouldn't that be lovely? So in our context, the mayor of Gainesville came over. He comes to events sometimes. And, it's just a limited appeal for big politicians. Even this Ramaswamy, Hindu political candidate, he's under a lot of fire for his religion. But it's a very polarized country, and it doesn't help in most cases. I hope that answers your question. You want to add something to that, Prabhu, or you have another? Rasika, is there a mic for Rasika Shiromani Prabhu? Okay.
I was going to say that it seems like in our situation, things happening from the grassroots up seems to be the most effective for our society. One of the greatest things that we can do is to gather together and hear and chant the Srimad Bhagavatam. Simply just to read out loud Srila Prabhupada's purports, which are full of nectar and power to transform our lives and spiritualize the atmosphere.
Very nice. Yes, chanting also, the ether is purified by hearing Bhagavatam, by chanting it. It has an impact in the world, even if it's not perceptible to most people. And I take inspiration from the Christians also. They were persecuted, thrown to the lions, crucified for hundreds of years. Finally, because they had such good character, the government officials kept giving them more responsible positions because they had such good character and were trustworthy. Up to the point where 300 years in, finally Constantine, the king, became a Christian. But in order to make it the state religion, he had to get them to compromise a bunch of the philosophy. But anyway, yeah, so maybe you'll be the one, Drew. Maybe you'll be the one to reach the first president with Krishna consciousness, or be the first Krishna conscious president. What do you think? Would you vote for Drew?
2024.
44. All right, so we'll stop there. Thank you, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai.